Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell told reporters yesterday that it's possible the GOP will seek to legislate a national abortion ban, directly countering congressional Democrats' efforts to codify Roe v. Wade. McConnell, however, declined to definitively say whether the GOP plans to take such action should the party regain control of Congress in the fall.
McConnell's comments are only the latest in a week of intense legislative mudslinging as both parties threaten to use Congress, state, and local legislatures to codify abortion protections or restrictions. Just yesterday, Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves told CNN that while Republicans in the Magnolia State have other priorities at the moment, they have not ruled out legislating bans against contraception like the morning after pill.
Our rising panel joins us now to discuss. Julia Manchester is a political reporter for The Hill, and Sam Geduldig is a partner at the CGCN Group. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, Julia, what do you think about the politics of this, Roe v. Wade battle right now? Because my understanding is that, Democrats are on pretty solid ground with a substantial majority of voters wanting abortion to be legal in many cases, not all cases, but many cases. But how does any kind of national ban or national protection for Roe v. Wade play into the upcoming election?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Robbie. We've seen poll after poll show that in, many cases, the majority of voters are in favor of protecting Roe v. Wade. Now, abortion protections and views on that change once you start talking about later term abortions. However, there does seem to be a majority of voters that are in favor of some sort of protection for Roe v. Wade. In terms of how it influences the midterms and voters politically, we really have yet to see that. We know that this galvanizes the conservative anti-abortion base as well as the liberal abortion rights bases. However, I think there's a big question mark around how this impacts independent or swing voters. I think you're seeing a lot of Democrats very much try to target a lot of suburban voters, in particular suburban female voters who may be also targeted by Republicans on the issue of inflation, for example. But it's interesting, whenever I talk to Republicans about this issue, when I say Republicans, I mean Republicans on the Hill and in the establishment, I don't hear a lot about abortion. It seems to be inflation, crime, and the border. That's something Republicans have been very successful and very good at being disciplined on. So I'm curious to see how they want to talk about this issue of abortion, because it's such a sensitive issue, I would say, obviously, for both sides of the political spectrum.
Well, Sam, so, we'll throw this question to you then. How much do you think Republican voters actually do care about the abortion debate? I mean, if Republicans, which likely will probably take over Congress in the fall, inflation's going to be that's going to be a tough issue to solve, no matter if you're on the Democrat or Republican side. That is something that maybe would be with us for a while because of past mistakes that have been made. There's a lot of a lot of these things are difficult to solve. So do you think Republicans are going to hang their hat on this abortion issue and say, okay, we're going to go around and we're going to try to ban contraception, even the morning after pill? I mean, is this going to motivate voters?
Well, yeah, it will motivate pro-life voters for sure. And they're a major kind of part of the Republican coalition that needs to be energized for Republicans to have a good election. So, like all these issues, different states have different levels of support, I suppose. So, in some of the redder states like Mississippi, I think, you'll see some bills and legislation like you're seeing, and in the Northeast or the West, you might see kind of more toned down versions. But Republicans have for 40 years been, supportive of the pro-life movement, supportive of overturning Roe v. Wade and making it a states' rights issue. And I think when they're in a position to talk with pro-life voters, they'll talk about this issue. I think generally, though, heading into Election Day 2022, they'll focus on pocketbook issues and things that are more maybe pressing to more Americans, getting price of gas down, securing the border, those sorts of issues.
Although this is beyond just a states' rights issue. I mean, if they're talking about actually banning abortion, that is now that's going a step further. I mean, that's not just, okay, well, each state make up your own mind.
Well, I think, what the leaked Supreme Court decision does is turns it over to the states. I mean, you're talking about McConnell, I guess, passing a bill that would ban it nationally. That would need 60 votes. He's in the minority right now. He doesn't even have the ability to bring that bill to the floor of the Senate. That would be Chuck Schumer's job. So I don't see them having the votes to do that in the near future. And in the meantime, if this leaked decision is right, it basically becomes a states' rights issue. And I think you'll see blue states have it be legal and whatnot. And I think you'll see red states doing what you saw Mississippi do.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an important point. In turning this issue back to the states, I mean, it is the case, I just said a few minutes ago that most voters, from what I can tell, support abortion being legal in some cases, but that doesn't mean all cases. It looks to me like the most maximal kind of pro-choice attitudes, the attitudes of the kind of people you see, like protesting outside Kavanaugh and Roberts' houses over the weekend, that, abortion should be legal, pretty much right until the very end of pregnancy. That's actually not a popular view. The pro-life view that, abortion should, or the most maximal pro-life view that really abortion ought to never be permissible or ought to be fine to ban it in nearly all circumstances, also probably not representative of most voters. But there is a probably large in-between position, the position that other countries in Europe actually have as well, right? That abortion is absolutely allowed, but then restricted after 10 weeks or 15 weeks or something like that. But, Julia, do we don't really hear that being talked about as much because, the two activist sides on this issue are the loudest voices and are driving policy because that's who or is that the case? I think they are driving policy because the political figures are responsive to them because they're so loud and so visible, even neither actually represent a majority view.
Yeah, they are driving policy to some extent. I would agree with that. But at the same time, I think leaders of both parties and the establishment and then the campaign organizations in both parties are very cognizant of the fact that right now, even though there is definitely an argument to be made on both sides that this could be an economic healthcare issue and really go beyond the issue of, let's say, states' rights, both sides could argue that. But I think the establishment leaders on the Republican and Democratic sides would argue that still the economy, for example, inflation is, especially the Republicans would argue that that is a top priority right now. In terms of healthcare, and we know that Democrats have been very, very successful in the past, especially in 2018, on campaigning on healthcare. I wouldn't be surprised if Democrats make a play in the party establishment to very much campaign on this issue as much as possible. Republicans, even though I think there is definitely a connection with that pro-life part of the party, they're obviously have a seat at that Republican Party table. I don't know how much of an emphasis they're going to put on that because we've just heard throughout this cycle, like I said before, it's inflation, crime, the border. That seems to be three issues that pull very well for Republicans. So I'm curious to see, how this abortion issue impacts that, especially swing voters.
Right, and I think those will continue to be the main issues. Maybe if this was coming out, this stuff with abortion, Roe v. Wade, right before the election, I think it might have had more of an effect. But, we got to leave it there. Sam, Julia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll have more Rising right after this.